The Planar Magnetic IEM market continues to grow day by day, and now we have a new addition from 64 Audio. How well did they do? Well, let's find out. Hey folks, I'm Matthew from Bloom Audio, and today we're going to be taking a look at Solo, a new Planar Magnetic IEM from 64 Audio coming in at $13.99. I'm just going to get one thing clear here. I've actually never really been too much of a Planar Magnetic IEM fan. There's a lot of similar characteristics in Planar IEMs that I've just never really greatly enjoyed like some other people have, so we're going to see if Solo is able to move the needle for me. We've got a lot of things to cover, like its tech, its build and design. We got some graphs to show you guys, so let's just not waste any time. Let's jump into how Solo looks because I think it is downright gorgeous. Right away, Solo grabs you with its copper mesh faceplate and the 64 Audio all-over logo print that just adds a very nice, captivating look to the faceplate of Solo. To complement Solo's faceplate, we also get an 8-wire cable that I would not have expected to be in the packaging of a 64 Audio product, but I am pleasantly surprised, and this cable is definitely welcomed to breathe a breath of fresh air into 64 Audio's product line. I think the standard 64 Audio black cable has kind of run its course, and I'm really happy to see some change here. And we also get a 3.5 and 4.4 balance cable, another change here in 64 Audio's unboxing experience, which I definitely think was much needed. A lot of IEMs now are coming with either modular cables or coming terminated in 4.4. I think this is a great change for 64 Audio, and I'm very happy to see this happen. As for the rest of the unboxing materials, you get the standard 64 Audio experience here. You get the leather carrying case, you get the IEM cleaning tool, you get a cleaning cloth, you get your sticker, and you get your shirt clip. So as for the tech inside of Solo, we get the 14.2mm planar magnetic driver that's become somewhat common in other planar magnetic IEMs, so that shouldn't come as too much of a surprise to folks. However, what's interesting about Solo is the dual Helmholtz resonators packed inside the shell. If you don't know what a Helmholtz resonator is, you're not alone. I actually had to do my research here too, and there's a lot of great information out there, so if I don't explain this properly, just let me know in the comments. Try and be civil about it. I really tried my best to learn what it is, but I may butcher this. This is a Helmholtz resonator, and also a milk bottle. That probably sounds like garbage through the mic, but that's the best you're gonna get. How the bottle works as a Helmholtz resonator is like this. You have your neck and cavity. The neck is the opening and the cavity is the body of the bottle. When you blow air into the opening of the bottle, or the neck, the air inside the bottle compresses and decompresses, forming pressure waves. The cavity of the bottle will amplify the frequency, thus creating the sound we hear. So what are these dual Helmholtz resonators even doing in the Solo? And that is a great question. If you want it in 64 Audio's exact verbiage, 64 Audio need a combination of a slight but broad reduction in high frequency amplitude and the attenuation of a few very narrow frequency bands. The two microcavities, 3D printed into Solo's sound chamber, operate by forcing air in and out, causing the air inside to resonate at a specific frequency. So 64 Audio recognized that most planar IEMs suffer from very high energy in the treble region. They decided to use this dual Helmholtz resonator solution to reduce these frequencies and give a treble that's slightly more digestible, and they definitely accomplished that. But before I get into the weeds about how these Helmholtz resonators reduce the treble frequencies, I do want to give a quick shout out to Pud, who is probably the coolest guy in the industry right now. He made a video on Helmholtz resonators and how they were implemented in his headphone, Old Thumpy. This was a great video and just kind of gave me the information that I was looking for and what these do. If you don't know who Pud is, definitely go check out his stuff. I have it linked in the description. Guy is super cool and I really appreciate that video, so thank you, Pud. Also, fun fact, I drink one of those milk jugs every day. So that's why it's empty. I didn't just pour out the milk. I didn't even have to plan to bring in a dedicated Helmholtz resonator. I legit have that with me every day, so there you go. Now jumping into objective sound, as always, you have the graph on your screen. I have it on my phone. We're to take a look at this together. And yeah, you can see that those treble frequencies are pretty reduced, but what remains is still that upper mid-range energy that I'm going to get to in just a little bit. First, I want to start off in the bass, as there is a nice sizable bass shelf here, but it's not anything monstrous. It's not super dramatic. I don't think you're gonna go into your listening sessions and the first thing you notice is just how amplified that bass is, because I don't really think it is. In the subjective portion of the video, I'm gonna be going into more detail about how the bass response's best characteristic is basically how well it extends and how deep it goes. I don't really think its quantity is the show-stopping key characteristic here. Rather, more so just that extension. If you had trouble with planar magnetic IEMs in the past, most notably in the upper mids with the energy it produces, I will say solo is probably going to stay the course here, and it may not be for you in this regard. For me, I'm a little bit more upper mid-range tolerant. I kind of like vocals more forward in the mix. Sometimes it can be a little much. I'm going to touch on that again in the subjective portion. But yeah, if you feel as though you're looking at this graph and already saying, that doesn't really seem for me, it probably isn't. Now, the treble in solo is definitely where it separates itself most from what's already on the market today. A lot of other planar magnetic IEMs, to me, have just been too peaky, and I just don't really enjoy their treble response. I feel like solo was the first to really go against the grain here. And I'm gonna pull up a graph that kind of tells you more about what I'm talking about. So Campfire is no stranger to planar magnetic IEMs. They've most recently come out with Astrolith, and that's the IEM I kind of want to compare solo against. I'm not gonna go too deep into this comparison, but I do have this graph here that shows you what I'm talking about. In the red, we have Astrolith, in the green, we have solo, and these two are aligned at 1K. As you could probably tell already as to what I'm alluding to, if you look at the treble frequencies, you can start to get an idea of what I'm talking about and how different solo is from the rest of the market in its treble response. You can also see that those upper mids in Astrolith are pretty forward too. There is just a common characteristic here with planar magnetic IEMs, but that stark contrast between the two in the treble response is what I find so interesting, and how I see solo separating itself a lot from the different planar magnetic IEMs that already are on the market. So now moving into subjective sound. Solo's bass response isn't about the quantity, more so about the quality, how deep it goes, and how far it extends. I thought John Coltrane's Stardust, and most notably Paul Chambers on this album, was just simply phenomenal in his bass playing. Obviously, he's one of the greatest bassists of all time. However, on this album in particular, I thought solo really demonstrated a lot of great characteristics in its bass response. Every time Paul Chambers was the focal point of the song with his bass playing to the right of me, it was just incredibly thick and weighty. There was such a sense of gravity to his bass plucks that were really captivating, and this album basically became a must listen every time I had a listening session with solo. I just thought solo really presented a great sense of presence and just quality to Paul Chambers' bass playing that I thought was simply phenomenal, and definitely a must listen if you do end up getting solo or getting the chance to listen to it. I don't think any bass head is going to pick up solo and say, yep, this is it, this is my end game set. I think a lot of people that appreciate deep and well extended bass are going to take a listen with solo and just really appreciate what it has to offer in this portion of its sound signature. So now in the mids, this is probably where solo's sound signature is at its most polarizing. While on one hand you have instruments that have nice timbre to them, everything sounds cohesive, coherent, and relatively naturally portrayed, I think the upper mid-range is what's going to throw a good amount of listeners off. While there's the listener like me that can appreciate more forward vocals, there were times on certain tracks where it did get a little bit fatiguing and had just a small amount of bite to it. When listening to MF Doom, all caps when you spell the man's name, you start to get an idea of where I'm coming from here. You have vocals and you have rhyme schemes that are very captivating and engaging, but at the same time you get this nasally, more forward sense of vocals that just has this bite and just unnatural characteristic to it that can be a little bit off-putting the more and more you listen to solo. I think I was able to smooth this out when swapping sources. I started off with my DX180, which I do all my critical listening off of, And then I ended up opting for the Cayenne N3 Ultra and its tube timbre mode, as this just had a way of softening Solo's overall upper mid-range presentation, and I thought it did a great job of kind of balancing the more forward vocals into a more digestible manner. However, on the contrary with these more forward vocals, there were times where I really thought they were just simply excellent. Jasmine Rogers' Boa and her album Twilight was simply just fantastic through and through. This is an album that I basically went top to bottom with any time I got the chance. Even with the DX180, I still thought this was an album that I just want to go through and through with, top to bottom, just really enjoy it for what it was. And now the treble, this is where I think Solo really captivated me and kept me coming back for more. I thought brass that extended very deep and cymbals that got crashed on very hard had excellent tonality and brilliance to them without any sibilance or any dullness. While looking at the graph, you may get the idea that there's just this sense of smoothness up top. I don't really think that's the case. I wouldn't categorize Solo's treble response as smooth, rather just very digestible and softly presented. Nothing had an overly smooth nature to it. Rather, you just get all the sonic information you need here in the high-end frequencies that I just thought sounded excellent on Solo, and I would definitely say is Solo's best characteristic in its sound signature. To finish up with soundstage and imaging, we're actually going to jump back to that copper mesh faceplate that was mentioned in the build and design portion of this video. Solo is not completely open back in its nature, but similarly to Duo, it only provides 12 dBs of isolation when inserted into your ear. So you do get this slightly open back nature to the IEM that should open things up and make it very wide in its soundstage and imaging. So upon first listening to Solo here in the office, again referencing back to John Coltrane's Stardust album, I went ahead and played that and thought Solo had a very expansive and wide soundstage that gave a lot of space to instruments in its presentation. I credit this to Solo's open back nature and just figured on every track it would be like this. That's not really what I found. I found on some sources and different combinations, the soundstage tended to narrow a little bit, and just on some tracks, it just wasn't as open as I initially thought. I would still say to expect a decently wide soundstage here, but I don't think this is going to be the end-all be-all in terms of soundstage and imaging. It's going to mimic an open-back headphone. I wouldn't get your hopes set that high, but I would say come with the expectation that instruments are going to have some decent space to them. So now what's the final verdict on Solo? I just can't say I could ever see myself having a Planar Magnetic IEM as my daily driver. However, I still think Solo brings something very interesting to the table. I think what 64 Audio introduced here is a lot of good things for the Planar Magnetic IEM market as a whole. I think the Helmholtz Resonator technology may be looked at from other companies and maybe introduced in their IEMs if they're able to figure out a similar configuration or even innovate something of their own. So while I wouldn't say Solo necessarily moved the needle for me in the sense that I'm now a huge Planar Magnetic IEM fan and this changed everything for me, but it did inch me closer to start to have a little bit more interest in Planar Magnetic IEMs as a whole and to see where they develop from here. Again, this was 64 Audio's first stab at this, and I think they did a pretty darn good job. If you've been waiting for 64 Audio to make a Planar Magnetic IEM or have just been in search for something that offers those planar characteristics in a slightly more digestible way without all that top-end energy, Solo presents a very intriguing case, and I'm very excited to see where 64 Audio goes from here with their Planar Magnetic IEM technology. Thanks for watching. You can check out Solo and a lot of other great products at bloomaudio.com. If you want to learn more about Solo, I highly encourage you to hit us up at hello@bloomaudio.com, drop into a live chat, or simply just leave a comment. I try my best to get back to each and every single comment that is left on the videos. If you want to compare it against an IEM, I can't promise I've heard it, but to the ones that I have heard, I'll definitely drop my impressions down below. So go ahead and fire away. As always, be sure to like and subscribe because we'll be back soon with more high fidelity audio content.